Okay, so this discussion that we're going to have, so you have your little pieces. What I want to do is talk about how to identify a chain. How does Oregon identify their chain? What are the special features, all the pieces that they have? And I handed out books. You'll notice that some books are small books and some are the large books. So like theirs. If you look in the large book, the very front section, if I laid this book down, this book will be the same thickness as the first part of this book. So everything up to the tab is this book. And then everything else in the book is other products that they sell. They don't make most of the rest of the products themselves. They do aftermarket. But as a company, they do a lot of aftermarket parts. The stuff that you find in this smaller book or the beginning of the large book, that is their forestry department. And most of that product that's in there is what they make. So they make the chain, they make the bar, they make the sprockets, they make the hubs. They make that physically here in Oregon and a couple of other locations around the world. But their primary, original founding place was in Portland, Oregon. So if you go to Portland, it's just south of Portland I want to say Gresham, but it's not Gresham. But it's just on the south edge of Portland is their manufacturing facility. It's huge. They give tours all the time. And so you can go down there and take a tour. So we have as a class gone down there before and made it through the tour. It's a whole day. So what we usually do, when we did it, we went down and they gave us a lesson on bars and chains and all that kind of stuff in the morning, and then we got a tour of the factory. They took us in the back of the factory. So a normal tour is a tour of the factory, and an unusual tour is to go in the very back corner, and that's their R&D, where they research and development. That's where they design the chain, they test it. So back there, you go in this door, nonchalant door, but you go in there and it's a whole facility, and that's where that red sharpener that we were using, they have some of those, and you can actually go and they teach you how to file chain and stuff. When you're done, they take your chain, put it on a machine, and they actually have it hooked to a computer, and it cuts a piece of wood. So they got a log, and they take a brand new chain out of the box, put it on this machine, and go vroom, and then they give it to you. You sharpen it, and vroom, and the computer will monitor the effectiveness, the efficiency of your sharpen versus an out-of-the-box sharpen.
Nice.
How close were you to a factory sharpen? So I'm eyeballing it back there. It looks pretty good. I think this is going to cut well. They got a computer. It's exactly how close are you to a brand new. So doing that tour and going on that little piece is kind of unique. And the engineers are back there, so you can actually talk to them about what they go through and how they come up with all these different chains. So they'll give you a little bit of history and kind of some of the reasons why and some of the horror stories and how they tested it and stuff. They have shelves of chainsaws. Every kind of chainsaw manufacturer that's out there, they have a saw. So anybody that decides to get in the chainsaw market, they go buy their saw and they test to see if their chain sprockets, everything fits on their saw. And they hook them to their computer and they do tests on them and stuff like that. So they have tested and make sure, because 70% of the chain in the world is made by Oregon Saw Products. So they are the number one chain maker in the world. So steel, I think, is number 2. There's only like 3, maybe 4 people that make chain. So it's not, I mean, they make most people's chains. So pretty big, significant. No, Steel does make their own chain. So they make it for Husqvarna and all those other people, but Steel makes their own chain.
So you can probably use a Steel chain on an Oregon.
You can if you figure out how to do the translation correctly. So they are the same pitches, the same gauges, that kind of stuff. Yes, you can. And I can take a Steel chainsaw and I can put an Oregon chain on it if you can kind of figure out all the little pieces, which is, you'll learn how to do that in this class. And I'm going to show you that partly in this book. What I can't show you in the book is there's no chart that says if you have this Oregon chain, put this Steel chain on. If you have this Steel chain, put this Oregon chain on. No. You have to go through all this measuring process and come up with it. So it is a little more difficult to cross back and forth. And I don't remember, there was another company out of Canada that made chain. Same thing, there's standardization within the chain. They sold to a China company. The China company came into the United States, tried to sink Oregon, so they produced a really low quality and a very low cheap chain. But it was dangerous, it would break. There were a lot of accidents with it, but they're in China, they didn't care. And so Oregon was able to sue them, and they were big enough and healthy enough. It hurt them bad, but they stopped the company and sank them. And I think they finally bought them out so they could just take everything away and control it again. So they got that junky chain back off the market. So there is another one out there. So anyway, just some of the things that are out there about chain. So looking at it, the book that we have here, and when we start getting further into this class, there's going to be some information on steel products. There is a booklet, it's not this thick, on steel products, and it shows how to read their chain and how to match it up to the right chainsaw. And I tried to print it. I thought I printed it. Apparently I didn't print it, or didn't. I don't know, something happened. It's not in that printer either. So I thought I printed it last night, but it was late, so somehow I didn't. And the booklet's not like this booklet. So anyway, today I want to focus on Oregon product for the most part. So I want you to open your book to the very front. So they kind of give you a little bit of history in the front. If you got the big books, they cover a rather unique chain, which is called their Power Sharp chain. And I don't physically have that here on the table. Kindle, can you go look on the table over there on this side over the 2-cycle and see if you can find this Power Sharp setup laying on the table? So it kind of gives some advertisement, kind of some of the products that they do. Then they kind of get into this information. This is what I was looking for earlier, maybe with you and somebody. Here we say witness mark. That was with you. So these different symbols that you see, is this in the big book? This is not in the big book. So in the little book, they actually identify what the little marks that we're going to see a little bit later. So this LubraLink, LubraLink witness mark, and then if you turn the page, we got LubraWell, LubraJet, LubraDam, VibraBand, LubraChannel, Cradle, and Microlite. So they're all different symbols that you see in this book explains what they are. And so later on, as we flip through, all of a sudden you're going to see a chain, and it says this chain has these features. And what they do is they just give you the symbol, but they don't say what it is. So if you read through here, what are those symbols? What do they mean? What do they do for you? So you guys can actually see them. You guys will have to look at the book later. But they're actually in the book, and you can actually see it, and then it tells you what it is. So the VibraBand, one of the big ones, because chainsaws vibrate a lot, and so they did some things on there to help keep the vibration from getting in your hand. Loggers in the old days, without all the rubbers and the springs and stuff, it would translate into your hand, and they get white knuckle, and so for hours or days their hands would have no blood in it. It'd just be white because there's so much vibration, it damaged it, and you actually lose feeling in your hands. So they've done a lot to try to reduce vibration so that you don't have white knuckle. And I've experienced that. I used to have a 009 steel, and I got rid of it because when you got done, your hands just tingled for 2 hours, and there's just so much vibration. No, we'll deal with it later. So okay, so we're moving on. So the next thing that we're going to come to, which is in your big book, is the label. So in this Oregon book here, we have a blue label and a yellow label. In your guys' book, there's a yellow label and a green label. And so Oregon used to be blue and yellow, and steel was green and yellow. And then they standardized the industry, so today it's green and yellow, everybody. And so green is a safer, low kickback chain. Yellow is not a reduced, it's just a standard professional chain, and it has no reduced kickback features. Can you tell the difference between them if you were using it on a saw? Even a professional logger is not going to really see the difference between them if they were all filed correctly, because it doesn't affect the depth that you cut. All it affects is when the chain goes off the tip of that bar in that quarter kickback zone, which is the only place we can get kickback. What happens is, instead of having a dead space that I can get into the wood, the next cutter just takes a full bite, grips, and then flips up. Instead of doing that, we have these bumper tie straps that are sticking up there, and so they bump on the wood and keep the saw from actually biting into the piece of wood and kicking the saw up. So you got to think, you got this cutter that's traveling down, it's going up over the top here, it's going to grab that piece of wood, and if it stops, it's going to throw, and it's going to throw that chain and the bar backwards, and that's that kickback. And so if I can reduce that by putting some type of material in there to kind of bump against the wood that's not going to bite into it, I'm going to reduce the severity of the kickback. And that's what all those bumper tie straps and all those things are doing. They're reducing the cut as it turns the corner and exposes that cutter out there. I'm reducing it. So you really can't. There's people like, oh, I just cut them all down. They're always in my. They're not really gonna. You're never gonna know. All it's gonna do is maybe save your life someday. So don't take them off. So what kind of saw, chain, and guide bar do I need? So this book kind of goes through all of the questions that you're going to go through to determine. Customer comes in, so I want to buy some chain. I'm not sure which one I should get. You can kind of go through this chart and come up with what's the best one. So partly what's available for your saw, and then in his circumstance, which one would I choose? So they have these questions, and I didn't see that in that book over there. So again, it's another piece that's different than the book that you see there. So we'll go through, and they have, should I use a round ground? Should I use a square ground? So all that kind of information is in here. The next one, different types of chains that are available, and then they go right into bars. So now, the next section that's here, this whole big long section that's in whatever color you call this, burnt red, this is an application. So you would find out, guy who comes in, I have got a steel chainsaw, I want to put an Oregon chain on, I have a Husqvarna, I have a Dolmar, I have a Shindaiwa. Okay, so it's alphabetical. So you'd flip through here until you find, okay, oh, you have a Homelite. Oh, here's Homelite. So what's your model number? So it has the model number at the top. So we look at the model number. What length of a bar do you have? And then you go across and you can figure out what bars are available and what bars can you put on your saw. And then what chain goes on your saw. So the following section, which now you're getting into this section. So if you flip through, this is different brands. So Tanaka, I went too far. So here's a Skil. What's interesting, if you're new in this industry, if you flip through and look at all the names of all the chainsaw people that have put their name on a saw, and you look and you're thinking, these people made a chainsaw? At some point in time, those people made a chainsaw, put their name on it. So there's a lot of different brands out there that are just weird that you may not have seen. John Sered, how many people have heard of a John Sered? So John Sered is actually owned now by Husqvarna. Husqvarna bought them out. If you were to go east of the Mississippi and said, you know, has anybody heard of John Sered? Everybody's got a John Sered. That's like the saw back there. And so they're extremely common over there and not so much over here, but that's a very common saw. So if you have a John Sered, you can actually go in, if you know what you're doing, you could find a Husqvarna. It's the exact same saw, different colored plastic. All the features, all the pieces, all match. And so at some point they merged and you can find them. So Lombard, Makita. So there's a lot of different saws. So you guys can look at Partner. Partner is out there, Pioneer. So we're going to keep flipping forward here. We get out of bar and chain applications, and then we actually get into the actual chain. So chain descriptions. So a little bit earlier, Mike came up, had a chain. He's like, how do I know what I have in my hand? So that's like walking up with one of these chains without the tags. So if I took all the tags out, said, okay, we're going to have a quiz today, and your job is to take these 4 chains and identify it. So if we had just a sit-down class, like just on campus, it'd be easy to do that. But the people that are off campus, how do I mail these to them? So that's why I don't do that. So anyway, if I gave you 5 chains, said, okay, identify them, this is where you would go. You would go to this section, and you would look at the profile. Look at the end view of that chain. Is it a chisel or is it a round? So is it got a chamfer on the edge, or does it come perfectly square? What kind of cutter type is it? So I want to look at the kickback reducing features. Does it go straight up? Is it the bent style? What kind of reduced kickback feature is there? I would look at what's between the cutters. What kind of safety device is in between the cutters? And then I would look at what are the features, and that's where these symbols that we talked about. This one has a witness mark, a Vibraband, and a Lubralink. Those are the features of that chain. And then you can read the description and say, is that the type of chain that I want? So the customer comes in, I'm looking for a chain, I'm doing these kind of things, this is kind of what I want to do. You could look in here and say, yeah, I think this chain would be your best choice. So it's to help you know which one to choose for them. If they have yellow in the tag, in the tab at the top, yellow means it's a professional saw. Up here I have a blue one. Blue, which is now green, is a reduced kickback feature. So even though both these might fit on the saw, this would be like a homeowner and this would be my professional logger chain. So you kind of know what are you going to be cutting, how often do you cut, what's your experience. Well, I just occasionally cut, I don't cut very often. I'm just, weekend warrior, cut up a little firewood. I have a tree fall down in my yard, I want to be able to cut it up. Well, you don't want to sell them a yellow label chain. So sell them the blue label chain. So those are how, or green label chain. So the next bunch of pages go through different size saw chain, different features, different benefits. After that, this particular one goes into a cross-reference. So I can actually cross-reference some of the pieces between some of these saws. So this is a cross-reference chart. Replacement parts, so this particular one, once I get out of that section and go into the next one, so go past that section. So scroll all the way to the end, and the little books are going into replacement parts. So is that what you have? Yeah. So these are replacement parts. So why do I want replacement parts? If you've got a chain that's broke, the guy was cutting, boom, it flew apart for some reason, he was running it loose, it came off the sprocket and it damaged a link, you don't want to be cutting a bad link out and putting a new link in. If he ran it off the chain and he kinked and snapped the chain and it physically broke or almost broke, you want to replace the chain. So these replacement parts are not so that you can repair damaged chains, really. These parts are if I have a loop, so you can buy a 100-foot roll of chain. And the customer comes in, I need a chain for a skill. And you're like, skill? Skill made a chain? Yeah, here it is. You're, okay. So you can do the measuring and actually make a chain for him, the exact same chain. And these replacement parts are the tie straps. So unlike a chain, if you work in the farming industry or any kind of industry and you work with roller chain, they have a master link. You slip it in, you have a cover, and there's either pins, sometimes there's a wire, there's a little clip that goes on, there's lots of different styles of master links, you would never use that style on this. We're looking at a chain that's running about 70 miles an hour, and you wouldn't want that little clip to come off of there and all of a sudden, phew, come apart. And so if we're going to make a chain, we're going to use a rivet spinner. And so we're going to get into rivet spinning in Module 2. And so we'll actually use these replacement parts. You're going to take the pieces, put them together, and you have a tool that you sit there and spin, and it will actually form a rivet and rivet together just like all the other tie straps. And so we'll be doing that. That's what this replacement parts are for. So it goes through that. This one, if I turn the page, it gets into my chain filing chart. What does your guys go into? Here goes into bars. There it is. So yours is actually backwards. The filing chart is first. So we were looking at Alexis. We were looking at your chain. You had a John Deere, no names on it, no markings on it. We used the little gauge, so we used this particular gauge, and we determined what is the gauge, what was the pitch, and we figured out what are the features of it. So we used the features back here with the chain and identified what chain did she have. Once we identified that, we went to this chain filing chart, and she had a 91 VG. It's a 3/8 pitch chain, so you go down to 3/8 pitch, and you go down to a 91 VG. And then there you go across, and it should tell you what file should she use and what angles should she sharpen at. So that's how we knew what to file the chain that she had in her hand. Same as the one that Mike had. Mike's, we identified pitch, gauge, cutter style, and then we went to the chart, picked out what file, what angle, what are we going to do. And so this one page covers all of Oregon's chains as far as files and stuff. But you have to identify this strip over here first. So that's where I would use the rest of the book to do that. And this fancy little tool makes that easy. So this one here, this tool has multiple features. One, we have 4 corners. The 4 corners are different thicknesses. If I have a bar, we don't have a bar in here, but if I had a bar, I would slip this down in, and I'm checking the gauge of the bar to see what my gauge is. If I had the chain in my hand, I'd flip the chain over, and I would look at the gauge, so I would flip it so it's upside down, and I would stick the drive link into the slots. So we have slots here, and I would slip them in until it doesn't fit. So this particular one in my hand is a 50 gauge. So this is the gauge of the chain, and this is the gauge of the bar that went into. So I can do either one. So that's the slots, that's the 4 corners. Then we have 2 notches, 2 notches, 2 notches, 2 notches, and that's my pitch. And pitch is the distance between 3 rivets divided by 2. So you can get a ruler out and you can physically measure that. Or if you have this fancy tool, you would just lay this tool on there. And when 2 rivets fit perfect within 2 of these holes, that's my pitch. So we'll start with the camera. Can you see that in the camera? Okay. So this one here is a 3/8 pitch. The 2 rivets are showing up in the holes. If I hold it right. So, and if I were to go to some other size, it would either be 1 in and 1/2 in, or not at all. If I went to quarter pitch, it wouldn't even be in there at all. So this tool measures pitch, gauge of bar, gauge of chain. And then I also have the hole size, so if I pull out the file, I got the round file in my hand, and I can't read the little number because it's like barely in there and I'm trying to see, you can actually put your file in the hole and figure out what size file you have. So I can't use this to figure out what size file to use. I can't do that with this particular tool. On the back is the metric equivalent of all those, but I can tell you what size file I have. Now that I know the pitch, the gauge, and what style it is, so the style, which was the VG, all that kind of stuff. So we actually went to the page and identified the chain with all that information. Then I can now go to this page and get the file I need and what size and what angle and all that. So you can see there's some stuff to do. So cutter sequence, so either right before or right after they talk about cutter sequence. So down here, cutter sequence, we got a standard. So that's a cutter, a tie strap, a cutter. That's a full or a standard. Semi-skip has 2 tie straps and then a cutter, and then a tie strap and a cutter, and then 2. So it goes 2, 1, 2, 1. And a skip chain is going to have a cutter, 2 tie straps, a cutter, 2 tie straps. So every other one is missing. So that's how you identify the different ones. So we talked about the other day, we want to use a skip tooth if I have a long bar. So I'm trying to keep my RPM of my engine up high. So I'm going to go to a skip tooth with long bars. I typically go with a full set when I have short bars and a high horsepower engine. So the more cutters you have, the more horsepower it takes. The next section in here gets into the bar. So they go through the first section is how to identify a bar. What does that number mean? So they give you a whole chart. Roll down the chart, read what it means. So we have all the different features of the bars in this chart. And then they go into individual bars. What are the features of that bar? Gives more in depth. So the next multiple pages are different bars. And they have micro lights and stuff. They have some with aluminum inserts, some with roller tips, some with smooth tips, all kinds of different pieces. Some of them have replaceable tips. Your professional chains, bars will have a replaceable tip. And then they get into the business end where you hook it to the saw. These pictures are physically correct. You take the bar out of your hand, you could lay it on here and it will match. And sometimes you can identify it just by laying it on here. What does it fit? So the next bunch of pages is that. Tomorrow I'll try to bring in an InTes bar so that we can see what an InTes bar looks like. That was kind of covered back here. And we'll talk about the Power Sharp. So we'll bring those 2 in and show them to you tomorrow. We'll try to bring the concrete cutter in. So then they get into sprockets. These are physical dimensions. You can physically put your sprockets and stuff on and actually identify part number wise what your sprocket and stuff is. And then they get into sprocket application by saw model. So you find your saw, you can find part numbers and order all that stuff. And then after that they get into tools, accessories. That's where our chain sharpener, rivet spinners, greases, all that stuff comes in. Files, chain files, all that stuff. So, and this book gets into other accessories, but as far as chainsaws, that's how it covers it. So when you guys ask me the question, I got a chain, how do I identify it? I'm going to say, go to the book. So rather than me doing it like I did in the last 2 days, now I'm going to say, you show me how you found it in the book, because I just covered it. And I'm going to upload it in your classroom. If you forget, you can go back and watch it again. How's that? And we're out of time on our film, so I got to stop. So.